Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. Today, to open up, we are honored to have Peter Blanche here. He was a clinician, researcher, and is now a manager for Cricket Australia. His official title is Sports Science and Sports Medicine Manager. And today, his talk will focus on the need to measure belief in sports performance. So please join me in welcoming Peter Blanche.
Good morning. There was a time, I'm sure there was a time in my clinical career as a physical therapist working in elite sport in Australia where I believed I had magic hands. I could lay my hands upon our wounded warriors and they were able to walk again. And like many self-professed healers of time go past, I felt I needed to share my extra skill. Now, instead of going down the path of creating a new therapy, but a Blanche therapy, or writing some sort of semi-scientific manuscript deriding the uncaring and unholistic nature of Western medicine, I went down the path of scientific clinical research. Idiot. It is so much easier to believe you have special powers than it is to actually prove it. And I had to, as I got involved in clinical research, I had to deal with this phenomena, the placebo effect. And unfortunately, most of my special skills revolved around the placebo effect. But I prefer to call it today the belief effect. Placebo effect has really quite negative connotations. It has connotations of weak-mindedness or snake oil salesmanship, and there's parts of that. However, the belief effect, we all have beliefs, and belief effects can affect all of us. So I prefer the terminology belief effect. So instead of just being able to ask my patients, do you think I'm a good guy? I had to go deeper than that. I couldn't just use flash biomechanics and brain scans to show something was changing. I had to live in the world of double-blinded, placebo-controlled, randomised controlled trials. And that's a really, really tough world. And in fact, even now, that sort of trials, they're not good enough. The sophistication of just blinding the scientist, blinding the patient, having placebo is not sophisticated enough. The sophistication level of trials has increased significantly. One of the things that has to be included in trials now is a no treatment arm, so that you know what the general progression of the disease. So often in clinical areas, that when patients come to see you is here when things are really, really bad, and guess what's going to happen? They're going to get better. And it's been the lifeblood of healers over history. So we need to know treatment arm. Often the expectations of patients as they go into treatment regimes are very high. And the vaguer symptoms and the wackier the treatment, the expectations can raise extremely high. And very rarely are the expectations of patients or clients going into trials ever measured. And finally, there's no credible placebo or measurement of the blinding. 96% of trials don't have some sort of measurement. Which side of the trial do you think you're in? And often they don't have a credible placebo treatment. And so the clinical example I'm going to use today to illustrate this is acupuncture. So the early trials with acupuncture would use a placebo intervention like an ultrasound machine that's switched off. Now, an ultrasound machine that's switched off is a great placebo treatment for an ultrasound machine that's switched on, but it is not a placebo treatment for acupuncture. The flashing lights and the buzzing electronics of a 20th century machine has completely different meaning to the history and invasive nature of acupuncture. They have completely different meanings to people, and so they are not equivalent treatments. Of recent times, there's been great advances in creating credible acupuncture placebo treatments, where needles don't penetrate the skin and non-acupuncture points are targeted. Now, within the acupuncture community, there is some pushback on this, and that people will argue that they're not really sham treatments. But for today's argument, we're going to talk about the belief effects and the components of belief effects associated between sham and real acupuncture. Acupuncture has this huge romantic history, thousands of years of Chinese medicine. After all, why would Utsi, the Iceman, have acupuncture points tattooed on his skin if in fact it wasn't proof then of its obvious powerful efficacy in the treatment of all ailments? So people go into acupuncture trials with high expectations. Now this is a trial done in West Germany of 800 subjects, randomly assigned into two groups of sham and real acupuncture. And the clinical outcome that they were looking for is if you had a 50% improvement in your symptoms, mostly pain, these are painful ailments, so it was a 50% improvement in your pain was considered to be a successful outcome. Now, cleverly what they also did is they took one other measure, and that measure was, do you believe acupuncture is a helpful treatment? And what they found was that those subjects that had high expectations for the treatment were twice as likely to get this 50% improvement in their ailment to those that did not have high expectations. This is irrespective of what treatment you received. Unfortunately, within this study, they had no measure of the blinding. So they didn't ask people, do you believe you had sham acupuncture or do you believe they have real acupuncture? In this previous study, this was a study looking at the length where acupuncture was used as an adjunct treatment to normal pain medications in the pain course of the extraction of wisdom teeth. Extraction of wisdom teeth, often used as a model for pain, hurts like hell for a period of time and then you get better. So it's a lovely model to use. And so these people were treated with the sham acupuncture or real acupuncture as an adjunct to normal pain-killing medications. And what we see here, that there was no difference between the traditional and sham acupuncture. But then what they did was ask the people, which group do you believe you were in? And then there were differences. If you believed you had true acupuncture, were unsure that you had true acupuncture, or believed you had sham acupuncture, there was considerable differences in how long you had pain for, irrespective of which treatment that you received. And finally, this last one we're going to look at here was looking at the symptoms associated with irritable bowel syndrome. And what they were interested in this trial was the social interaction between the healer and the client and how that had an effect on the treatment outcome. So, good trial. They have a normal progression of the disease, and so they have that. Then they had a limited interaction, a sham acupuncture group. So they got acupuncture for 20 minutes twice a week over the 6 weeks. And then the final group was an augmented group. So an augmented group, they got a special intervention. There was warmth. I'm glad you've come in today. I understand it's a big problem for you, and I'm hoping that we can help with it. They had active listening. Now, what I hear you saying to me is that this has been a big problem for you for a while now, and it's really interfering with your life. Have empathy. Look, I'm really sorry that it's been this long. You've had no help. I'm really going to try and find something that's going to help you out. This one I used quite a bit in my career, which I didn't realise. It was the thoughtful silence. So I went, I know just exactly what will help you. And then, of course, the affirmation of the positive treatment plan. This is going to be tricky, but I've seen this a few times, and if we go about this the right way, we'll be able to help you out. How do you feel now? You feel a bit better? Yeah, good. And so did the people. So did the people in this trial. So this 100-point improvement in symptoms, that's over a 500-point scale, so a 20% improvement. In these types of scale, that's considered to be very clinically significant. So big change just within the social interaction of the client and therapist. So from this, what it would take from it is that the efficacy of acupuncture can be explained by a number of, well, a big part of the efficacy of acupuncture can be explained by whether you have high expectations where it's going to help, whether you believe, in fact, that you got a credible intervention, and thirdly, whether you were within a supportive social interaction when you received that treatment. Now, by now, you're probably all going, what the heck's that all got to do with sports performance? Well, as I moved on in my career, I got into the area of sports science, and particularly I got into the area of performance sports. Now, I know we've looked at all the sports here over the last day, so hockey, baseball, basketball and football, that's all of them, isn't it? In fact, I was interested in the performance sport. So when I say performance sport, I mean running, swimming, rowing, cycling, things that are measured by time, because that's pure sport. And surely none of this belief thing comes into it. Performance is what it is, and we scientists can sit there and physiological eke out the boundaries of that performance. And in sports performance research, there's this very romantic phenomena, the 1%ers. What we're after, we're searching for the 1%ers, that little bit extra that will make you a champion. We're going to help you find that 1%. That's what, if we take the last Olympic Games, that's what 1% would have meant, going from 7th place to 1st place. So the difference between Olympic gold and Olympic glory and being an also-ran that only your best friends and your mum remembered that you actually were turned up. It's a very romantic notion, and I don't think it's actually quite that easy. Now, here are some of the things that have preliminary evidence as 1%ers, 1%, all with supposedly different mechanisms. We have sodium bicarbonate, buffers lactic acid. Creatine increases muscle growth. Beetroot juice, or actually the nitrates in beetroot juice, but I always prefer to say beetroot juice. It's more exciting. Beetroot juice decreases your cellular costs. Caffeine, we're not really sure about caffeine. We all think we know about caffeine, but anyway, we think it's a stimulant. There's some preliminary evidence to show that there's improvement in these performance sports, by this in this magic 1 to 2%. All with supposedly different mechanisms. So in fact, if they had different mechanisms, they should be somewhat cumulative. We should be able to add them up and make 5 or 6% improvement in performance. How cool is that? I'll be the scientist, I'll take a guy from 30th place to 1st place. Remarkable. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen. When we add these things up, what we get is this same 1 or 2% improvement in performance. And I think what we're finding with that is the same 1 and 2% that we're finding in all the others. And that's in the area of belief. And there's a number of studies done over the last couple of years starting to look at this in the area of sports performance. So this is a trial looking at 1,000-metre running ability. A Roman square design, randomised order of going through these different interventions. The intervention at this stage was bicarbonate, so buffering the lactic acid. So if we take the first part of the Roman square, you were told you didn't get the intervention and you did not get the intervention. That's our baseline measure. And that's how these guys get along all right. 3 minutes for a 1 kilometre time trial. Not superstars, but okay. Then, the magical intervention. We told you you got the intervention, off you go, and we did give it to you, and you ran, and look at that. Magic happened, 1.7% improvement in performance, the time went down, booyah. Then things get a bit funny. Told you didn't get the intervention, but we did give you the intervention. Oh, not much change in performance, and of course, the kicker, when you're told you got the intervention and you didn't get the intervention, there was still this magical 1.5% improvement in performance. So just expecting to get the intervention was more important than actually getting the intervention. Now, again, they didn't test the blinding in this, and they very rarely test the blinding in these sports performance trials. This is a trial done on 10-kilometre time trial in cycling. So there was several trials. So the first couple of trials are baseline trials to say, well, this is what your performance is. And then the subjects were told that they would receive one of 3 different interventions. You would either receive a placebo intervention or 2 different concentrations of a caffeine drink to test this effect of performance. Now let me orient you to this slide a little bit. This cyclist here wasn't in the trial and is there for decorative purposes and for also parochial purposes. There's obviously the fine young Australian Cadel Evans who won the Tour de France last year without the use of caffeine, but is up there. The graph here, on the other hand, so the 0 line is each of the subjects' baseline. The grey area, there's a 1.5% each side. That's considered to be no change in the performance, negative in performance, positive in performance. And this number here is the likelihood of making a 1.5% improvement in your performance. So when the cyclists thought that they had taken the placebo intervention, there was only a 4% chance that they would have a 1.5% improvement in their performance. In fact, there was a likelihood of around 50% that they would have a deleterious effect on their performance. When they believed they had the low concentration caffeine drink, there was a 45% chance of improvement in their performance. And when they believed they had the high concentration, there was an 86% chance that they had improved their performance, 10 kilometre time trial performance, by 1.5%. Unfortunately, all the interventions were placebo interventions, and led these researchers to make this statement. It's reasonable to suggest that researchers should also examine the impact of belief on performance, either controlling for or treating as independent variables the beliefs of subjects in intervention studies. And I couldn't agree more. I would say that in intervention trials, that after your baseline testing and before you go into randomisation, that we need to measure the belief. Do you think this intervention will help you? Yes, maybe, not sure, probably not. No, it doesn't have to be any more difficult than that. During the trial, at some stage we need to try and measure the blinding effectiveness. Which group do you think you're in? After the trial, but before the retest, and there was a mistake on the cycling trial, which they actually asked people after their trial, so it's different. Before the retest, do you believe this intervention has helped you and you will perform better? Yes, probably, not sure, probably not, no. Because what's happening in sports science research is that sports scientists are starting to trawl through the data and look for responders and non-responders to different interventions. And I think this is a reasonable thing to do. It's not to slavishly be held down by 0.05 or group statistics and you're trying to tease out the issues at an individual level. However, unless you're taking into consideration the normal progression of your training plan, unless you're taking into consideration the expectations of the athletes going into your trial, unless we're taking into considerations the belief that the intervention they have is going to help them, and unless we're taking into consideration the very powerful social environment that revolves around a lot of scientific interventions into sports performance, I don't believe we're actually finding responders and non-responders. I think we're finding believers and non-believers. Thank you for your time, and we'll take questions.
Hi. It seems to me that one aspect of belief that is particular to sports and not true in acupuncture, for instance, is that if you believe, then you can actually work harder. So there's kind of an active component to what you're doing to achieve your result that isn't there, for instance, with the acupuncture. So it sort of suggests to me maybe that having a positive motivation going in, leads to better performance. So I was just wondering what you thought about
Look,
that.
I think that there's subtly difference, but the premises are quite similar in that when you go into an acupuncture trial is you believe, you have positive affirmation, you believe that this is going to help me. And again, that your training is you believe it's going to help me. We're looking at adjuncts to training. But it's a good point you make. And in cycling, there's been some really interesting trials just over the last 6 months where you do your time trial and then you get a virtual reality feedback and you get to chase yourself. And then cycling's great because you can ramp up the power outputs and things like that, and people are good at chasing themselves.
This is all individual sports. Has there been any studies done, like collective teams and things like that, how coaching could affect belief, those kind of things?
It's a great question because it's a thing that we talk about in sport all the time, isn't it? We got to believe, and we had those quotes up there. Not that I know of. I guess why we fall to the performance sports is that they're great models to be able to measure. It's team sport is such a multifactorial thing, and it's a really difficult model for measurement.
Would you say that in regards to this, that maybe more so than belief, is it tied into athletes' confidence? And would you say athletes' confidence, one, sort of twofold, whether or not this is helping them, but also their confidence within themselves? And then do you think there could be, in essence, confidence analytics that you could chart and take out towards both individual and teams based on players' belief on, let's say, where they're going to make a shot and success rate?
Yeah, look, I guess I tie confidence and belief together as being almost the same thing. I don't think you can have high confidence and low belief. That's, to me, impossible. So I see them as being almost the same thing, and I think that's a very good point.
So how do you generally apply this with what you do, I guess?
Well, I guess that nowadays when somebody comes to me at Cricket Australia and where they go, look, we've got this new super duper intervention that's going to save the world, I go, well, really? Well, look, this is the rules that it needs to get passed for me before I'll start to take it on board. So to give you an example, at the moment, I've got people trying to flog me virtual reality training and for hypnosis. And I'm going, well, somewhere along the line, you guys have got to do a trial where you do, because within that, there's two environments. I've got these virtual reality glasses on, and there's a content to what's coming in. And I keep saying to these guys, you need to do a trial where you compare that group with a group that just have the environment. And they don't want to do it. I'm going, until you do that, you're telling me it's all about the content, but you've got a content and an environment, and you need to have a credible placebo intervention. So it might work, I don't know, but until you've done that, it's not evidence to me. And so I guess what it does is gives me a set of rules on what I will take as being evidence of actual performance improving interventions.
It seems to me that the belief that drugs or substances in these performance sports are not having any positive impact is quite radical. Is that your position, or do you think it's performance improvements are a combination of substances and belief?
That's a difficult question. I come from a long history of working in an environment where we were very anti-drugs, and we probably tried to get in a situation where we make people have the ownership of their own performance, and that as soon as you start to try and externalise it, I tend to feel people fail. That they constantly look without, going, oh, I need this supplement or that supplement or this intervention. If only I could get those things, then I'd be fine. Almost guaranteed for failure, in my experience. So we try to make people stand as strongly by themselves. Thank you.